Let's just think about that for a second. How do you convince someone you belong in the normal world when they've already decided you don't? When every logical thing you say, every plea, every rational argument you make is just twisted and seen as another symptom of the madness they've already slapped on you like a label. Well, in 1887, one incredible woman decided she was done trying to convince people. Instead, she decided to find out for herself what happens when the very system that's supposed to help you is actually a trap. And the thing is, she wasn't pushed into it. Oh no, she walked right in on purpose. So our story starts on a place called Blackwell's Island. You might know it today as Roosevelt Island, a little sliver of land in New York's East River. But back then, in the late 1800s, it was a place of total isolation. It was where the city sent its problems. It had prisons, hospitals for people they called incurables, and, of course, the city's lunatic asylum. It was, quite literally, a place people were sent to be forgotten. Imagine it. The second you walk through those doors, everything that makes you you starts to get torn away. The first to go, your clothes. The very clothes on your back, your last link to your life on the outside, just ripped from you. In an instant, you're not a person anymore. You're an inmate. And then came the bath. And let me tell you, this was not about getting clean. This was an initiation, a breaking in. The water was absolutely frigid, hauled straight from the river. She described 3 attendants grabbing her, holding her down as bucket after bucket of filthy, icy water was poured over her head. It was like a baptism into this brand new, brutal reality. After that freezing shock, you're handed the institutional uniform. It's this thin, incredibly coarse dress made of cheap cotton flannel. No undergarments, nothing to protect your skin from the rough fabric or the bone-chilling cold that seeps through the walls. It was just another layer of the dehumanization, you know? Another way to make everyone the same, to make them nothing. And then came the silence, the waiting. All the patients were forced to just sit there on these hard, backless benches, forbidden to speak, forbidden to move, for hours and hours on end. The silence was just crushing, only broken by the occasional sob or cry from someone else. This wasn't therapy. This was absolute, soul-crushing control. But here's the twist. The woman going through all this horror, she wasn't insane. Not even a little bit. She was a reporter named Elizabeth Cochran, but she's much better known by her pen name, Nellie Bly. And she hadn't been committed by accident. No, she put herself there. She did all of this on purpose. Now, you have to understand the world she was living in. It's the 1880s, and if you're a female journalist, you're pretty much stuck writing about fashion or gardening or high society parties. And for a woman like Nellie Bly, this was infuriating. She was a firebrand. She wanted assignments with grit, with real substance. So when she finally landed a job at Joseph Pulitzer's famous newspaper, The New York World, she pitched an idea so audacious, so incredibly dangerous that they just couldn't say no. Her plan was brilliant, really. First, she checks into a working-class boarding house for women. Then she starts acting strange. She feigns amnesia, acts paranoid, stares into space, and refuses to sleep. And here's the really clever part. She starts calling herself Nellie Moreno and pretending she only speaks Spanish. She knew, even back then, that being a poor immigrant who couldn't communicate was a surefire way to be labeled insane. And it worked. It worked perfectly. The other residents freaked out, called the police, and before she knew it, she was in front of a judge and a line of doctors who declared her, and I quote, positively demented. Just like that, she was shipped off to Blackwell's Island. So once she was in, she dropped the act. She started speaking and behaving like her normal, rational self. But here's the terrifying part. It didn't matter. It didn't make a single bit of difference. The second she had been labeled insane, everything she did, everything she said, was seen through that lens. If she was calm, she was cunning. If she complained, she was hysterical. Her plan had worked, but now she was actually trapped in the nightmare she had only pretended to be a part of. And the daily reality inside was just relentless. The food was practically inedible. We're talking spoiled meat, bread that was basically just dry dough, and rancid butter. The water was so foul you couldn't drink it. Those ice baths, a daily torture. And maybe worst of all were their nurses. They weren't caregivers, they were guards. Nellie saw them choke, beat, and terrorize patients who didn't obey instantly. It was a system built on cruelty from the very top to the very bottom. Now, to make everything even worse, the place was dangerously overcrowded. It was built to hold about 1,000 patients, but when Nellie was there, it was crammed with over 1,500 women. And that's not just a number on a chart. Think about what that means. It means constant noise, no personal space, and every single resource stretched way, way beyond its breaking point. And if you want the most damning statistic of all, here it is. For those 1,500 women, there were only 16 doctors. 16. Do the math on that. That's nearly 100 patients for every one doctor. Any kind of proper diagnosis or treatment or even just basic human care. It was a mathematical impossibility. These women weren't being treated. They were just being warehoused. But out of all the horrors Nellie witnessed, there was one truth that shocked her to her core. A huge number of the women locked away with her were perfectly sane. They were just poor, or they were immigrants who couldn't speak English and had no family to stand up for them. They had been thrown away for being inconvenient, for being broke, for being different. The asylum wasn't just failing the mentally ill, it was actively imprisoning the most vulnerable people in the city. After 10 long days, just as they had prearranged, lawyers from the New York world showed up and secured her release. The story she wrote, a two-part series called 10 Days in a Madhouse, was an absolute bombshell. It hit the city like a lightning bolt. People were horrified, they were outraged. Nellie's first-hand account was so raw, so detailed, it was simply impossible to ignore. The impact was immediate. The city couldn't just sweep this under the rug. A grand jury was launched to investigate the asylum. And guess who they called in to help with their investigation? Nellie Bly herself. Just days after being an inmate, she was now the star witness against the very institution that had held her captive. And her reporting led to real, tangible change. The city increased the budget for patient care by $1 million a year. Now, $1 million today is a lot of money. Back then, it was an absolute fortune. This wasn't just a suggestion in a newspaper article, it was a direct financial consequence of her journalism. So what did that money do? Well, it fueled massive reforms. Translators were hired so immigrant patients could finally be understood. The most abusive nurses were fired. Sanitation was improved. The food got better. Nellie Bly's incredible bravery directly and profoundly improved the lives of the women she called the poor unfortunates. You know, this single assignment cemented Nellie Bly's reputation forever. And more than that, it basically invented a whole new kind of reporting, investigative, undercover journalism. She proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the immense power of the press to drag ugly truths into the light and hold powerful institutions accountable. And you think she'd stop there? No way. She was just getting started. The very next year, she was in Mexico reporting on government corruption until its dictator literally kicked her out of the country. Then, just 2 years after the asylum story, she took on her most famous challenge, a real-life trip inspired by a Jules Verne novel circling the entire globe in a record-smashing 72 days. The woman was unstoppable. But it's her work on 10 Days in a Madhouse that remains this perfect testament to courage. It's not just about the courage to face danger. It's about the courage to see injustice, to really see it, and then to use your voice to fight for people who have no voice of their own. Which kind of leaves us with a question, doesn't it? Nellie Bly used the power of her words to expose a hidden injustice well over 130 years ago. And it really makes you wonder, what dark places, what hidden corners of our own society right now are just waiting for their own Nellie Bly to show up and shine a light?